All right, if you're just now joining, we're going to give it just a couple of minutes for people to join in before we get started. Give it about 2 more minutes before we get started. Hello, if you just joined, we are going to give it another 2 minutes before we get started to let people file in. All right, I think people may join a little late and that's okay, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So to kick things off, we do want to keep this very open and for everyone to ask questions. So please use the Q&A functionality in your window and you can ask questions as we go along the discussion. And then there's also a chat, but if you keep your questions in the Q&A, that'll help us out. This is recorded, so if for some reason you have to drop off early or you would like to reference it again, we will get in touch with how you can get access to the recording. So I'll kick off. If you're not familiar with Shadow Ventures, we are a capital venture firm based in Atlanta, focused on early stage startups in the construction and built environment, or prop tech as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let our guests, Jerry, Larry, and Russ, introduce themselves and their firm.
Oh, thanks, Kayla. So I'm Jerry Cohen. I'm founder, managing partner of Cohen, Tauber, Spievack, Wagner. I'm a corporate attorney, business attorney, work with lots of startups in all industries, tech and others. And very quickly on the firm, we're about a 20+ lawyer law firm in Midtown Manhattan, a full service firm working on corporate matters, litigation, technology, IP, patents, and so forth. And happy to be here. Larry?
Okay, hi, it's my name is Larry Tauber. I'm also a corporate partner at Cohen, Tauber, Spievack, and Wagner. A lot of focus of my practice has to do with early stage companies and startups and giving a lot of advice on that. They're generally many of them are in the technology sphere, though they're in other industries as well. And it's fun working with small companies and helping them grow.
Thanks, Larry. My name is Russ. I'm also with the firm as senior counsel. I've spent a lot of my career on both the business and the legal side of startups and early stage companies. I work with Jerry and Larry all the time on helping these companies do what they need to do, and I'm very happy to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So I'm going to kick us off with our first question. And like I mentioned earlier, please, from the audience, feel free to jump in with questions that you have. But you guys obviously work with a lot of small businesses just getting started. What is the biggest mistake that you see these small companies make when it comes to their legal needs? whether it be patents or intellectual property? What do you see the biggest mistake being?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because we have companies come to us after they make that mistake, and then we have to unravel the issue when most of these things are so easy to fix from the ground up. So one matter I see often has to do with IP. It has to do with inventions, intellectual property, and so forth. When you have programmers working with the company on whether it be a software or some algorithm, and ownership is an issue. So the programmer might be an inventor and interfere with the patent rights and so forth going forward, which is very cumbersome to unravel, and something that investors are wary of. They don't like to invest in a company that doesn't have a clear path to its intellectual property. That's one of the mistakes that I see.
So yeah, I agree with Jerry there, obviously, but I think, you know, it's part of a broader problem, which is that everyone is so anxious to get going and to do things that the legal aspects and the papering, you know, they put off for a later date. So some of these things, in some respects, could be fatal. In that, for instance, if you're a company that has, for instance, a patentable product, and you have a patent and you don't protect the patent adequately in the front, and you don't have the proper documentation, such as confidentiality agreements, that you could end up, you know, destroying the patent. Or another, you know, major area is you have partners, but you don't come up with your deal beforehand about how the company is going to operate and run, and then you run into some disagreements later on, and you don't have proper paperwork on how to work it out, whose responsibility is what.
Yeah, just to add to what Larry said, you know, another way that we see this is a lot of companies start in entrepreneurs are very ambitious. They want to get things done really quickly. So they'll have their friend who's a developer help them develop a product, or they'll have their friend help them manage the business, or their cousin or their college roommate. And, you know, they don't always want to check in with the attorney about what they need to do. But the problem is, if you're having your friend develop your product and there's no agreement in place, it might seem like it's a hassle to consult with an attorney about making sure that that's documented. But you have to think 1 or 2 years down the road, and we get it. This is really hard. But when you're talking to your angel investor possibilities, or to a VC firm, or looking to sell the business, that's the first thing they're going to look at. Do you have all of this buttoned up properly? And it's going to be a much bigger problem down the road. So it's a tension, and it's, you know, it's a question of balance. You want to keep moving, but you also want to make sure you're not letting problems lurk, you know, for later.
Awesome. There's a couple of questions that we have in the Q&A. One of them is, how do I choose between an LLC or an S corporation? That's a really good question. There's a lot of LLP, like, it doesn't matter if you're a tech company versus, you know, small shop with goods.
Okay, that's a good foundation question again. So, and there are considerations all around. There's a C Corp, S Corp, LLC. Those are the most popular vehicles, platforms. Very quickly, an LLC is such an entity where you have pass-through profits and losses. So in other words, you're not taxed on the corporate level and the shareholder level. You're taxed only once. What does that mean? When a startup has losses at the first couple of years, investors get to write those losses off against any profits they have on other ventures. So sometimes investors love to see an LLC that helps them with their tax planning and so forth. An S Corp is just like an LLC, where it has pass-through profits and losses. It starts off as a C Corp, and you just file a piece of paper with the IRS to become an S Corp, but you can't have foreign shareholders in S Corp. So if you have foreign investors, you can't go the S Corp route. The C Corp is a very common vehicle, obviously, think Coca-Cola and others. And that is taxed on both the corporate level and the shareholder level. Certainly, if you're moving forward to an IPO and so forth, you want to be a C Corp. but an LLC can be converted to a C Corp as well. So I think we see most often entrepreneurs starting with an LLC, and if they have to later move to a C Corp, in my experience. What do you think, Larry? Russ?
Yeah, so I agree, and I guess also part of it has to do with also where you are and what kind of company you think you're going to be and how you're going to grow. You might be, your path. Not everyone's path is I hope to have an IPO and go public. Some people's paths are I have a small business here. I'm going to do certain things. I think I can do them really well. I'm going to I'll develop certain products or technology, or I'm a service company that I'm going to do. I'm going to provide services such as just software development to other people. And, so in those circumstances, I'm not planning to become to go public. So I don't need to be a C Corp. I want to have, I want to have the ability to pass through profits and losses without taxes. And then, some considerations might be who are your shareholders? As we said, you can't have foreign for SCorps. If you're in New York City, there's and you're just planning to be a New York-centered company, well, there's a strange anomaly in the tax code that unincorporated businesses like LLCs get taxed higher than SCorps. It's a strange it's strange and it shouldn't be, but it is the case. So sometimes you have to talk with attorneys, talk with your accountants, depending upon what your plans are. What kind of company you're going to be, who your investors are, might affect also your decision.
Yeah, just to add to what Jerry and Larry are saying, I think, there's no single one answer to which type of entity is best. It depends, as Larry said, on what you want to do. So there are trade-offs to all choices, right? There's no one thing that's going to be perfect. And the right answer is not, oh, my friend's company is this form, has this form, so I'm going to take it too. The right answer is, as Larry was pointing out, what are your business goals here? What do you see down the road? What types of investors? What type of product or service do you have? And then you work backwards from that into the best choice of entity, and you go from there. But it has to be right for you.
Thank you. So the next question is, do I need an attorney as a startup leader? So I'm going to also add to that, when is a good time to get an attorney after you've started a business or you've grown, or when do you do that?
We're attorneys, and we like to see it as early as possible. The reason is there is such a footpath to our door for people who don't do it right from the get-go, and they have to spend more money later on to unravel the the mistakes. Sometimes and it's the right attorney also. Sometimes they go to their to their father's trust and estates attorney. Wonderful trust and estates, horrible for corporate finance. So I think the answer is get advice early. It could just be a consultation. It doesn't have to be anything special to set you on the right path as early as possible. Certainly when you have a partner, and absolutely when you have an investor. That's the short answer.
Okay. I'll give a shorter answer. Yesterday. I'll give you a quick example here. Everybody, big part of business today is branding, developing a name, developing a who you are and what your product is and how you're called. Branding is has such value today. So we see all the time people, they fall in love with a brand name, with a company name. They go to it, they get on, they start with their business, and 9 months down the road, after they've put in a lot of money and they've been promoting it, they find out, oh gee, somebody else has that name already. I don't have the exclusive rights to using this name. A simple thing, having, that's one of the things, for instance, attorneys will check. And it's not just simply going online to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and seeing what's been trademarked. You want to look at other things and other businesses, because even if you are able to, let's say, to trademark a name, it could turn out that other people still have rights to use it, and then you don't have that exclusivity that you're looking for. So there are just lots and lots of small pitfalls, and it's really worth the time of talking to an attorney and getting some advice at the very beginning. Get it done right at the first time, and you'll probably save a lot of money in the long run.
Yeah, I think one reason why people put this off is that they think that the attorney will be a hassle. You know, he or she will be expensive. All they're going to do is put up roadblocks. And, you know, what I would encourage people with an early stage company to do is look for an attorney, and there are many excellent ones, who works with other smaller businesses, because there's a way to approach this from a legal perspective that's help me get from point A to point B, but do so efficiently, and that knows you have a budget, and that needs to be very smart and surgical about how to do that. So I think that someone who works a lot with early stage companies and entrepreneurs will just have a better eye for how to do those things, you know, more quickly and more efficiently. Whereas someone who might be an excellent attorney, but as Jerry said, might not be in the same practice area, or who only works with very large corporations, you might want to try to steer yourself towards someone who works with a lot of other people like you, because I think you'll probably get better results.
Go ahead. So the next question is, what's the best way to use personal assets for a business? So I'll also add to this, we hear a lot, especially in startups that are technical, about bootstrapping. So they're using friends and family money and their own personal assets possibly. Is that ever really a good idea? Does that have any legal ramifications for tying up your personal assets into your business?
Interesting. When you say personal assets, I'm not sure if they mean cash or personal property. I think the most important aspect there, one of the most important aspects, is the documentation. For example, if it's, let's say cash for a moment, you want to make sure you have a promissory note. It could be a simple promissory note. You want to document everything that goes into the company, because ownership is going to be very important. If you have a document, then I don't want to get technical, but it becomes capital contributions and so on and so forth. You want to make sure that everything is documented, that you have a clear path to ownership and title and so forth. That's a quick answer about a cash or even personal property. I'm not exactly sure what the concern is there. Larry, you have any other insight there? Russ?
Just, when you're dealing with, you're talking about lots of small businesses start up on, money and contributions from friends and family. And obviously it's a sensitive area. I think, you got to keep two things in mind, which is with any investor, but possibly even more so with friends and family who are kind of trusting you with anything, is being upfront and honest and making full disclosure to them about really what the business is about and what the real risks are, and making sure that these are people who, hopefully you're probably taking small amounts, but you want to make sure that they are people who, just like any other investor, that they can bear the risk of loss of that investment. Because you're probably, there's always with any investor there, that's a legal risk. And obviously then with friends and family, there's more of, you've got to compound that with the personal relationship that could be placed in jeopardy or could be strained if things go wrong, and it's totally unexpected, or it's not within, what was explained to the people. So just, an additional consideration to keep in mind.
Larry, just touch also for a moment on, for example, a shareholder agreement or operating agreement for an SCorp, SCorp shareholder agreement, operating agreement for an LLC. In other words, if people are putting money in, you want to make sure, once again, proper documentation.
So yeah, so every company, generally when it has, typically small companies, investors, you have some sort of founding document that governs the relationship among the parties. In corporations and small corporations, there'll be an agreement among shareholders. In partnership agreements, there's a partnership agreement. In limited liability companies, there's what's called an operating agreement. But they basically are all kind of the same thing. They govern, what's the relationship between the parties, who's running things, how they vote, what you're allowed to do and what you can't do, how money is treated when it comes in, and and certain tax ramifications. And at the same time, what you usually try and do with all these things, the shareholders will make certain, or the investors, the people putting in money, you're going to make certain disclosures to them, and they're going to acknowledge it. They're going to say, I have enough money that if I'm well off enough that if I lose this money, it's not going to affect my lifestyle. I can put this money in, and I realize that this is a new company. It doesn't have any cash flow. It has a lot of risks. I realize that I may not get this money back for a very long time because this company doesn't have earnings. It doesn't have profits, and it may not, even if it gets off the ground, it could be a few years before that happens, and my money's going to be tied up. Or, it's a small company. I can't sell my shares if I need to. Who's going to, nobody wants to buy it. It's not like on the stock market. So those type of things, they protect you as the owner, your startup, because, because you've told them what these risks are. And at the same time, they're acknowledging to you that they understand these risks and that they've been told and they've had the opportunity to consult, let's say, with their own lawyers and business consultants to explain all this to them. And that provides additional protection for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, friends and family are, can be very important to an early stage company when it's too early to approach an angel investor, when it's too early for a VC firm. They can be very helpful. But, to Larry and Jerry's point, we're always wary of too much informality. And it might seem like a hassle to get too business-like with your family, but they are putting money at risk. You don't want to damage that relationship. There's no guarantee that you'll succeed. And people need to know what they're getting into. And it might be very tempting when you're trying to get started to say, oh, we'll just have a handshake deal, this will work out. But remember that it might not work out. And when you look at the failure rate of startups, it probably won't work out, with no offense to your particular business. So you have to be careful. We know it can be a hassle, but you want to try to do things in an official way as possible.
Just to add one quick point to that, when you have a more sophisticated angel investor, they will probably tell you what they want to see. There's something called SAFE documents out there, Y Combinator and so forth, develop them. So it really depends on the sophistication of the investor as well. I'll just put that out there.
Okay. There's a few more questions in the Q&A, but I do want to make sure we touch on it because we kind of touched on it with bootstrapping and family members getting involved. What is your advice for people who are involved with a venture capital firm, for example? Startups, it's very easy to see, there's this big company, they want to give me money. What advice do you have for startups working with venture capital firms?
Be wary. Every venture capital firm has a personality. Get to know who that VC is, you're interviewing them as well as they're interviewing you. Who are they working with? What has been their relationship with management? What has been their exit strategies? How have they exited? All these are very important questions about culture and personality. When the culture does not fit, it's a disaster and very dangerous. And then there are some VCs that obviously, I don't want to call them vulture VCs, but there are VCs that may sometimes take advantage of startups. You hope not to fall into their hands. Most of them are up and up, obviously. They want to succeed. You succeed because they succeed when you succeed. But just be wary, be eyes open, and certainly have a consultant, attorney, or other advisor with you when you're ready to talk to VCs. You're joining the big leagues.
Yeah, Jerry, just to add on to that, if you are at all considering raising money from VCs down the road, the time to start learning about them is now. Because as Jerry said, you're looking for a fit of what their investment goals are, of how they work, of what industry they specialize in, or what they like to look for as a target investment, as well as the cultural aspects of their personality. You're going to be spending a lot of time with these people. So you can start to network, even if this is 2 or 3 years away. You want to get to know the people who invest in your area, who maybe in 2 or 3 years down the road you'll want to approach. And it's never too early to start that.
And let me add also, if you're thinking of going to DC, it's very, very important to have a clean shop, clean documentation, clean everything. Everything's got to be up and up. They'll want to see financials. They'll want to see your documentation, your stock, everything. So you have to be clean as a whistle.
Right. So, a good if you get hooked up with a good VC, I mean, that's, in a sense that can be gold, because, good VCs really want to help those companies succeed, and will really, they have a lot of experience, and they understand that there are going to be a lot of bumps in the road, and they're prepared to help you get through those bumps and navigate them. So it's really they can be great partners. But when Jerry, as Jerry just said, you got to be clean as a whistle. What that means is, sort of goes back really to the first question we had here, which is you've got to start getting your shop in order on day one. Your agreements, you need your shareholder agreements or operating agreement with whoever's investing, so that is clean. You need your agreements with if you have developers who are working on technology, you need clean agreements with them so that the company has a clear ownership of its technology. You want to make sure, as we said, that the company names and branding and product brands and things like that have been vetted beforehand so that IP is clean. Everything, it all leads up to to that moment. In a sense, if you're sloppy in the beginning and you don't want to do the proper route, you don't want to go through the legal niceties, it could really hurt you down the road. That these people are going to say is, look, they're taking a chance and they're investing money in you, but they're not going to want to invest money where the legality of the company is messed up, and it just creates greater risks that even if the things take off, there'll be these potential claims or impairments to the company and its value.
And lastly, on that, also with VCs, just be careful on the corporate finance issues, dilution issues going forward, and obviously everybody knows that, but that's something to keep your eyes open on.
So I'm kind of skipping through the questions a little bit since we're on this track, but this question is, how should I approach equity pools for founders, investors, and employees?
One more time, Kayla, how can you say it one more time?
How should they approach equity pools for founders, investors, and employees?
Larry?
When
they say equity,
I think, I'm not sure, it seems that question has a couple of different aspects to it. So if you're talking about, you're going to your employees because you want them to participate, and it's not uncommon that in startups because there isn't a lot of money and there isn't capital there, that employees, some of their compensation is based upon either options or earnings incentive shares, so that or trying to get or having them participate and invest in the company. So on one hand, from a legal point of view, for instance, that's a little easier in that they have knowledge of the company's, inside information in the sense of what's going on and a better understanding in many cases. On the other hand, for that type of, people are participating in that manner, you want to make sure that, again, you have the proper documentation and, you've taken into account also in that respect, certain times, tax considerations. For instance, you don't want someone to get stock that might be given incorrect value or overvalued, and they have income at some point, but they don't have cash, that goes to pay the tax that could accrue on that. And then you're talking about, you said with approaching other people, I guess it depends. Everything depends on who you're approaching and, what you're looking for. As we said, we talked about friends and family. Now we talked about employees, third parties that you'll go to. There's more arm's length, and disclosure is a very important part of how to deal with them.
Just to add to that, investors like to see pools because it incentivizes employees. Once again, very important to set them up properly, the number and so forth, because that's going to add to dilution issues going forward, and has to be well thought out. Obviously, as Larry mentioned.
I mean, they're very investor. These types of employee pools and option plans. They're very tax sensitive. So they've got to be drafted the right way, so that you don't have some terrible unintended tax consequences.
Right, very important. So the next question, are there any licenses, permits, or you commonly see with startups or small businesses not having that gets them into legal trouble?
Well, that could be actually industry based. You know, obviously, if you're talking about life sciences, which we deal with a lot of, there are FDA and other regulatory issues up to wazoo, so to speak. So you have to be very careful in in that area. Depends on the industry. There's always state and city business permits and so forth that are rather simple to get. I can't think of any special permit that that's going to be a death knell. Usually they're easily obtained, and if not obtained at the right time, there's sometimes a penalty, but nothing shattering or that would be a death knell to a company.
I mean, you're not professionals. Have to have certain types of licenses to practice their professions. Manufacturing, if you're a manufacturing type company, there may be certain types of permits that are required. But assuming that that's the typical technology startup, usually doesn't have many permits that it has to worry about, at least initially. I mean, the only thing is which no one's talked about yet. Look, a lot of companies are selling, and they're selling, they're going online, and you have to comply with the various privacy policies and terms and conditions on using personal data. And that's very important. And that's sort of, that applies to anybody who's doing any type of business, online, and which is pretty much everybody now, since actually brick and mortar practically doesn't exist at the moment. Hopefully it will in the future. So that's something that you have to, those types of things, that's a legal issue. That's not necessarily a permit, but it's a legal compliance issue that you have to be aware of from the get-go.
Yeah, that's probably the area where we think that it deserves more attention. It started with GDPR in Europe, and then California has its own privacy law now, but you can't say, oh, it's just California, because first of all, California is so large that effectively it becomes something that everybody has to worry about. But also there will probably be other states that follow along. And if you are selling online, in particular to a lot of people, there are certain, requirements and metrics and so on, but you have to know about privacy and how your business touches that issue. And that's probably one of the major areas where we see that the founders or the owners haven't given it quite enough thought, because you really have to know your way around it.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because there's actually another question that touches on it. So you mentioned GDPR and then California's policies, which I know are a little bit different. Why do you think they make that mistake of not taking it seriously? Is it just because they don't have the resources, or they think they're too small that no one will notice or care?
All of that and ignorance sometimes. People are just not aware. And once again, that's one of the housekeeping issues and matters that is important to give attention to from the get-go, as Russ and Larry mentioned. It's actually not a small matter. And what starts on the West Coast in California always ends up on the East Coast as it moves east. So this is going to be a nationwide issue and concern. It is today. It'll be even more going forward. So it's people. You can't be an ostrich and hide your head in the sand. This is something that you have to give attention to. So it's either ignorance or, like you said, trying to hide, but you cannot hide. You can run, but you can't hide. It's important.
There are. Look, it has application in every state, even now. People don't think of it as much because GDPR is really a European issue, and California is a California issue. And most companies, at least startup companies, probably don't have enough business in California, or too small that they would fall under the California, under the California laws. But that being said, if they grow, they may grow into it, and so accidentally they'll start hitting that. A lot of the issues, privacy issues pertain anyway, though. Maybe not to the extent that, that GDPR and California rules apply, but there's still issues that have to do with using people's personal information with their consent, and not using it without their consent. And we already see New Jersey, for instance, has proposed some laws that are privacy laws that are similar to California. So as Jerry said, that's going to impact the rest of the nation. I mean, it's not, you think of it historically, for instance, started textbooks in California became, once they got approved in California, such a big state, usually that set the standard for the entire country. And then you had other industries where the same thing happened, auto emission standards in California, so big, it sets the stage and what it is for everything else in the country. And, the privacy and the internet is going to be the same thing. California is just so big that, and it does so much in the, such a big part of the economy that everything is going to follow it eventually. And you might as well start working on it now. And in any event, there are things that you must comply with now, even if you're not doing business in California.
Thank you. So this question goes back to, I think, what we had discussed a little bit earlier, but what mechanisms and questions should you be using or asking to hire an attorney that's right for you as a startup?
Well, that's a very good question. Okay, there are many aspects of that, actually. I think, first of all, does that law firm work with startups? It's a whole different a culture in a sense of knowing what a startup needs from day one in order to grow and to think about an exit strategy going forward. So does the firm work with startups? I think is very important. It's a very different expertise and experience one needs. And then like a lawyer is like a doctor. Do you get along with the lawyer? Face to face, sitting down across from a lawyer, is he someone that you have a rapport with, that you feel comfortable with, that you can bare your soul to, that you can put your head on his shoulder or her shoulder when you cry and when you succeed. So experience with startups, culture, expectations are very important. Fees, do they have a program to help startups? Do they know how to work with startups? And those are the things that come to mind.
I think,
Larry.
sorry. One other thing I just mentioned with that is also be careful, find out who are you actually going to be working with. Do you want, you come into this is not just for startups, but it's really with any law firm. You can go into a law firm, you meet with some partner who's got this, tremendous expertise and knowledge, or is very smooth talker, and then you find out you've had that meeting with that person, and then you actually never see them again, except for maybe an email around the holidays, because then you're shunted off to an associate who maybe have the expertise, but not the person you thought you were going to deal with, or may not even be that sophisticated and have that much, may not be as well trained. So you want to also ask, who am I going to be working with? And even if I'm not, you can't expect to work with a partner all the time, but if I'm working with an associate, will I have accessibility to partners, to speak with them? So how's that relationship going to work? Because what we have seen with some clients who have come to us is that they work with, sometimes they've worked with firms, and then the person who they had the intake with originally was not the person who they worked with. So that whole rapport and everything that they thought they had was actually not as helpful as they thought it would be. So find out who you're going to work, get the rapport, and who you're going to be work with. Make sure that's the person that you have to rapport with.
And just to add on to that, so another thing that I think is important that, look, there's a lot of really good attorneys out there, and there's a lot of other attorneys that do this as well. But I think an attorney who thinks like a business person, one thing that we hear a lot from clients is that they don't just want to know what the legal answer is in a document. They want to know, how does this impact me in my decision-making process? And, you know, can you step into my shoes and really understand what my day is like and where I'm trying to go? And I think that's important as well, in addition to, as Jerry said, the rapport and the sort of sense of getting along with someone who you're going to be talking to a lot. And it's not a question most often of who is a better or worse attorney. It's a question of, are you the right fit with that law firm or that attorney? And that's very important.
Thank you. So I know we're at like 3:40, so we probably won't go the whole hour, but a fun question here. Not all of you are based in New York, but for any of you that have been, or I can't remember if it was Jerry, if you were in New York, but what's your favorite place to grab a slice of pizza?
Well, that's easy. Ray's Pizza, the original Ray's Pizza, and the original Ray's Pizza. They're all good.
Well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say is that I went to school in the in the village, so yeah, Ray, everyone always raved about Ray's. So.
There you go.
My favorite place is a little place around the corner from where I live on the Upper West Side. It's called Sal and Carmine's. They're no name. People know about them, but just basic, really good cheese pizza is the best.
New York style.
Always. So just to wrap up here, any final words of advice for anyone who's on as a startup founder?
It's a rewarding experience. If done right, just be very careful and surround yourself with the right advisors and investors, strategic investors and so forth, and you'll do just well.
I'd say also, same thing, make sure you have, good people you like to work with. Look, some of these small startups, could be really the future of some wonderful things going on here. We're in really tough times right now, but it's going to be these innovative minds and these people who have with thinking out of the box and coming up with new ways. That's going to be the future. That's what's going to drive. It's already you already see how in this terrible climate of what's going on, how the people and how technology and these small companies have really revolutionized and then made the ability to even function as a society when we can't even be in contact with each other. So go to it and help change the world.
Yeah, I guess my advice would be, don't be shy about asking people to help you in your success, whether it's through relationships with potential customers or clients or possible investors or whoever else that you can meet that will help move business down the road. And that includes your attorneys. They should be happy to help you as well, because you want to have those people in your camp, sooner than you need them, and you can never do it too early.
Good advice.
Guys, and then just lastly, how can people get in touch if they're curious and want to have a consultation? Or
the firm is Cohen, Tauber, Spievack, Wagner. We're on the website, ctswlaw.com. It's Cohen, Tauber, Spievack, Wagner, law.com. And you can find us there. Each one of us the three of us here in our bios, we have our email and phone numbers and so forth. Feel free. We'd love to help.
thank you. And then for everyone on, I mentioned earlier, we'll be sharing this as a recording and telling you how you can get access to the recording. So thank you guys so much for hosting today.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.